Last week, I came across this really old clip of the Matrix corridor fire scene. This fire. So I thought of making something on the same lines. Well, not the fire as similar to this, but instead some smoke which shall behave in a similar fashion and can simulate some sort of interaction with the door as well. Kind of a smoke flood. So if this is interesting, then this video is for you. What's up everyone, welcome back to Fume FX. I am here today to bring you a new fun tutorial on this smoke flood. Now, artists are always thirsty for inspiration and they look for inspiration in everything they see, in real life or in their fantasy world. It's a common thought that artists have strong imaginations and they observe things from different perspectives. And well, the same is the case with me as well. I do get inspired by things which are around me and kind of fantasize different things happening, fumes and fluid and smokes. It kind of adds a sense to the entire illusion that you kind of build in your mind as well. So if you use it wisely, these kind of tools can really help enhance the fantasy element of really everything that we can imagine. So I'm going to be using Cinema 4D, which is my go-to 3D software for visual effects. And to create this smoke flood, I have Fume FX, which is an industry choice to create similar stunning effects. And Fume FX have been kind enough to send me the software so I can create some extremely interesting shots and share my walkthrough and tutorials with artists. So big thanks to Fume FX. Now you can get a trial and use it before actually buying this plugin. So I'll be leaving the link in the description below. So feel free to download and play around with it. Alright, so here is my scene. I have a simple door, which is right here. You can model one or get one from the internet. And I've just applied a simple animation to the door itself, just simply opening and closing in a certain amount of time. Now, to move on, the first thing we're going to need is a set of particles. And for that, you can simply just create a simple particle using Cinema 4D, which is available right here in Simulations and Particles, and you can create an emitter from here. As you can see, I can just pop down to my Fume group. I've got an emitter right here. And this is the one that is being used. And it's a simple pyramid emitter with this size and with X and Y as specified. Playing through the timeline, you can see that particles working in a straight line. Now the next thing that I wanted to do was to basically have these particles be deflected by the door itself. And for that, I've used a deflector, which is right here. It's a simple deflector right here. You can go to emitter and use an include to drag and drop your deflector right here. And now if I just play through the timeline, you can see how different particles may get affected by the door as well. They are not because the deflector is disabled, so I'm going to enable this. And if I replay the video, you can see that the particles are being deflected by the door. So that's halfway there. Right, next, what we're looking for is creating a simple field force this time. As soon as you open the door, you get a natural reflex of smoke spreading out more at the floor and then slowly moving towards the top. To replicate that idea, I had to use a field force. And within that, I used a cylinder field. You can see the cylinder right here. Now if I play my animation, you can see the particles, they will spread out by the cylinder right here. Now I just need the cone to just even out all the particles moving from top to this cylinder part, and it'll just even out both of these areas. To be able to do that, I applied another cone field, which is right here. You can see this inverted cone right here. Now this is something that is going to blend in some of the particles from the top within that cylinder. Now if you talk about visual effects, smoke can play a really vital role. It can help the animator to tell a better and engaging story and can set the tone and mood as well. It can also add clarity to the story and can give that extra punch to the excitement level that you want your audience to build up with and get more engaged with the storyline. So that's our particle setup complete. So now we're going to move over to Fume FX. First thing you make or you need when working on these smoke using Fume FX is a simple Fume FX container. If you click on that, it'll create this small container which you can size up and set up according to your own need. You have the simulation area which you can manage from here, and you can see if I just zoom out for a bit more, there is that width and height area that you can adjust. that is going to be the container of your simulation, and the height, the length and width is there. And then you have the spacing as well, which is basically, if I disable my background, you can probably see the voxel size. This spacing too is basically a single voxel size. You can see this small box right here. That's the amount of voxels, of 3D pixels, so to speak, in which rendering of the smoke particle will take place. So the smaller it is, the more intense it's going to be, more realistic it's going to be, and the bigger it is, it's going to be less intense and less realistic. In my case, I'm just keeping to 2 centimeters. So is this just one of the main settings that you need for Fume FX? I've got all of these panels right here, and the settings are going to be pretty self-explanatory, and I'll just give you a snapshot of all of my settings one by one and explain to you the differences that I've made. So here you can change the timeline of how much frames do you want to be played. That's the output range of how many frames the simulation should run. That is from 0 to 300, and that's, as I briefed before, the simulation area, the size of the simulation box. Next up, we have a simulation panel. Here you can set the quality of your simulation. Then I changed a little bit of vorticity to 0.9. Then I added a bit of turbulence here on x-axis. The rest of the attributes are pretty self-explanatory. Okay, and then we are simulating fuel, and we are simulating smoke. And smoke cannot basically work without fuel. You need to have a bit of fuel to, I think, help out the smoke as well, to be created and generated. If I move over to WTP, you have this wavelet turbulence, which I'm not using. I'm not really using anything right here. I've not really changed anything right here, so it's pretty much, I think, by default. Next we have rendering. Here I have a step size, which you can increase or decrease to improve the quality of your rendering. Then you have fire render or fuel render or smoke render. In my case, I'm not rendering fire, I'm not rendering fuel, the only thing I'm rendering is smoke. And these are the parameters for my smoke rendering. If you hop over to illumination, here you can add the lights that you would like to affect your smoke. In my case, I'm using redshift, so I'm using an area light and a dome light, which I've added right here. And if you're using any conventional lights from Cinema 4D, they can be dragged and dropped here. So if we go through the history of visual effects, a big turning point for the cinemas, if I could look back, is that George Lucas film that was Star Wars in 1977. That was a blockbuster of that time, and still till this date, the film is jam-packed full of visual effects that could just set a milestone one after the other every single year to come. And it just kept enhancing. I mean, we've seen so many advancements in visual effects since that time. So today, as well, I'm creating a visual effect that is commonly used nowadays, and no film or movie is sort of complete without it. Next up is object and sources. Right, that's the main thing. So once you added your Fume FX container right here and you've set it up, the next thing is to tell Fume FX how the smoke has to be generated. So Fume FX have an option to use either a simple source or an object source. You can put in an object, something like cube or whatever object, and you can tell that, alright, this is the object that I want to use as a smoke source, and that will come under the object source setting. Next up is particle source. Now in our case, we are using an emitter from C4D, and that is going to be our particle source. So if you click on particle source, it will make a particle source for you right here, and you can drag and drop your emitter right here as I've done so. The rest of it is pretty straightforward. All the settings are right here on your screen. Now, since you have told your particle source that we are going to be using these emitter and these particles from this emitter as our particle source, you got to go back to Fume FX and into object sources and add that particle source right here as well. By default, there will not be any source right here, so you can just drag and drop particle source. So Fume FX container knows that you're going to be using a particle source, and particle source knows that you are using an emitter as particles to be driven. So that's a pretty straightforward setup. Okay, so next up is the renderer setup. So in my case, I'm using Redshift. So Redshift has its own now if you're not using Redshift, then you simply just render and start seeing the effect working. But if you have Redshift working, and so you'll need to create a RS volume, which is a Redshift volume, and within that Redshift volume, the main thing that matters is setting up your scatter channel, which I did. And since our scatter channel, the only channel that we're rendering is smoke, so you can just go to this small little dropout and from Fume FX select smoke. Here you can identify the color that you're looking for, and if you go to advanced, here you can set up the old min, max and new max settings. And if I just head over to my different layout where I can actually see the Redshift render view, let me just enable all of these lights. You can see everything in action. Create a simple background, and now if I just scrub through timeline, you can actually see the smoke is coming through the door. So this really is everything that was required to create this smoke flood. As you can see, some of this smoke is actually popping out of this door, and I can definitely play around a little to tweak this setting, but I thought it's better to just move on to After Effects and just do like this sort of a little mask which was drawn in After Effects and just cover it up with a base mask. So that's everything about the smoke flood that I created. I hope that you guys have enjoyed this, and so that's pretty much the wrap from Cinema 4D and Fume FX part of the video. So that's everything for today. I'll get in touch with you guys soon with something more interesting than this. Stay tuned, keep subscribing, keep liking, and keep commenting. Till again, Forest Tech signing out.